The ability to listen is an underrated attribute which is losing traction in the modern era. As we continually refine our technology, information is placed on a higher and higher pedestal. This results in people being crushed by their own anxiety to speak correctly. They spend too much energy on considering what they're going to say. Their brains are too taxed to listen, so they lose out on the opportunity to communicate because they don't have the energy. If you want to communicate with anybody, then focus on your ability to listen. This is the ruling principle in good conversation. People who aren't capable of understanding what the other person they're talking to is saying are incapable of meaningful conversation. Your archetype doesn't matter in terms of limiting your ability to communicate. Your maturity and your patience do. There is more in the world than you can imagine. Your thoughts will never assist you in maintaining a conversation if you retreat into them. Developing your ability to be present is paramount to good communication. Functions are relatively unimportant when considering how to communicate with others, but it may be helpful to focus on your extroverted energies. By addressing how you relate to the world through your functions, you can find pathways that are easier for your personality. Focus on whatever energy feels natural for you to partake in conversation as long as it is successful. You'll need to balance yourself well to become a good listener, whether or you're introverted or extroverted. Even extroverts tend to be poor listeners, so don't assume that a social presence is the same thing as emotional depth. Instead, think about the conversations that you're having as you have them. Asking questions you honestly have is a great place to start. By asking questions during the conversations you partake in, you will communicate that you are actively participating in it. No one wants to feel like they're talking without being understood, so by interacting with what they have said, you will show that you're trying your best to understand them. Ultimately, that's the best that we can do. There is no perfect understanding that you can achieve. Every conversation will have some thoughts left unexplained. This is because we cannot harness telepathy at will. We have to rely on context clues and tone to figure out what other people mean. Realize this and humble yourself. Get used to the fact that there will always be more for you to learn than you know. Addressing the way that pride is a part of your life and focusing on the present is the only way to start actually listening to the people around you. Most people don't even do that, so starting to better your abilities as a communicator will place you in a far better position than most. It's not that hard to develop yourself, but many are too selfish even to sacrifice the time. However, once you go against the common ways, you will realize how rich communication actually can be. Listening allows you the opportunity to be an active part of the conversation. Instead of having to imagine the right thing to say or decoding the principle of people's thoughts in your heads, you can simply get rid of having to do any of that by being present. People want to communicate. No conversations are intended to be useless. So, if you work with someone to understand what they want to express, then everything will go smoothly. Things are supposed to work out, and a little bit of effort can change everything. Even saying less in conversations so that people have the room to flesh out their positions fully can radically improve your conversations. There's no value in being a doormat, of course. Active listening doesn't mean completely retreating from your own rights to expression. If someone is continually talking at you, then make sure to interject into their stream of consciousness, or else they may forget that you're even there. This is another reason why asking questions is a great strategy, because it proves that you are to be addressed, not talked at. If someone responds to questions like "you're not there," then they're awful communicators. It's never the case that everything is your fault, so always be ready to consider the different factors that go into a conversation. If you've tried everything that you can and interacting with someone just makes you feel awful no matter what, then disengage from the situation. The way that people reply to questions speaks volumes about their personalities. If they seriously consider them and take the time out of diatribe to contemplate their answers, then there's a lot of hope for great conversation with them. It's a sign of good culture to be able to help people understand what you're discussing, even if the person you're talking to has no experience with what you're talking about. This is because it shows that you're interested in communicating ideas no matter who you are speaking to, rather than somebody obsessively following a train of thought. No one enjoys being talked at, so by working to treat people with respect and patience, you'll avoid coming across as mean. Meanness is perhaps the worst attribute to have, no matter what kind of person you are. People are sensitive and they are quick to withdraw when they feel offended or undervalued. One of the worst ways to offend someone is to communicate that you're not listening as they speak. Developing your ability to be attentive and to respond to conversational cues that come up is a safe strategy to avoid this. We all carry the responsibility to listen. There are no listeners and talkers, but humans. And to communicate, a human must go through the entire range of expression. Don't cut people slack for the way that they are, or because of your relationship to them, and don't let yourself get away with things that you shouldn't. Understand that the responsibility falls squarely on your own shoulders, and that we must have the conversations and relationships that we wish to see in the world. All of us get to decide what reality is and will be through our action. Make sure to use your input wisely. We are taught how to listen through our environments and the people we are surrounded by. Most people who struggle to communicate, both in listening and speaking, were abused in some way. This is because we remember how we are treated, and the standards that are set in childhood are often the standards that we carry with us throughout life. If you react with impatience or distaste to someone who doesn't know how to socialize properly, then you will only be reaffirming this processing of the world. Try to break the cycle by giving them a different standard to work with. Support what they say, communicate with positive energy and healthy posture, and generally be a good friend. Tell them that you're there for them and promise that you're not going away. Many people have to have this amount of support to feel comfortable to begin expressing themselves. Demonstrate a different way of treating others than they have known, and you will often be rewarded with a great friend. If they respond to this only by recreating the dynamics from their trauma, then there is nothing that you can do. Some issues can only be addressed by the self or by doctors. It is better to have tried and been wrong than it is to be a coward. Don't feel like you have to save anybody that you have given your attention. Talking to someone isn't an agreement that you'll be the cure to their issues. Give them your best effort, listen to them, and be caring. But if that doesn't work, then head out on your own way. Life is too fragile to let people who want to tear you down hang around. Respect your own space and health too. Learning how to listen also means learning to listen to yourself. Being able to disengage from toxic behavior is one of the best attributes that someone can have if they want to be a positive influence in general. The kindest people are the people who are most commonly preyed upon by serial killers. This speaks to a reality that evil does not want a fair fight. It wants to stalk and defile what is better than it. Learn how to work around this by being kind, but kind with a backbone. Give as much as you want, but never let people take from you. Force people to get permission before any of your resources are used. There are thousands of ways that people can try to communicate with you to manipulate you into doing something for them. It's difficult to be wise to all of them, but luckily humans were gifted with an amazing gut. No matter how good someone is at lying, your body will know when you are being lied to. Our gut processes our feelings as much as our brain or our heart. So be aware when you feel uncomfortable. Often it is because you are correctly divining something about the situation, so respect that. Once you start to feel unwell around someone, or your spirits sink when you have to interact with them, then disassociate. It is great to listen to people who are different than you, and we must keep open minds, but never let someone into your life that disrupts your natural energy. Living in alignment takes balancing several aspects of your life until you can truly inhabit yourself and your environment. If there are people in your life that expose both to negative energies, then the journey to find harmony will become that much harder. Some of us are blessed with good families, and if you are, then tend to yours. A family is a holy unit, which has within itself the map for our psyche to use while we enter into the world and navigate, communicating with the 8 billion other people in our species. A good relationship with your family, especially your parents, will deeply ground you and teach you about interacting with people that are different than yourself. Listening used to be the most important skill. Before we had homes, we still had to communicate. Seasons changed, wars were fought, diseases ravaged populations, and farming had to be invented. All of these things could only be addressed by thousands of people communicating and communicating well. It was through our association with one another that the modern era was born. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about those issues as they have been handled. But now we've lost out on the necessity and the utility of clear expression. This is why the family can be so helpful. It is a holdover from the time of the tribes, as we needed families to survive and to bring up the future generations. This inherent structure behind it still has a piece of those wild societies that we first formed, back where communication wasn't an option but the norm. Working with conversation, listening, and expression, and in general, in terms of the utility of them, is the best approach. We are creatures that are meant to express, not necessarily to think. For thousands of years, we got along without written language, so you shouldn't have to strain yourself too hard to be able to carry a good conversation. If you're anxious about conversation or you still don't know how to approach it, then bring in that prehistoric atmosphere. Don't address people for the schools that they've attended or for the ways that they compartmentalize modern living, but address them for what they are, for what we all are, flesh with consciousness. Get along with primates and you'll be able to get along with anybody.